All right, welcome back, folks. And we're going to get ready to dive into the second segment here. In the first segment, we had Alfredo open up with us about his testimony, how he came to know Jesus, and where he started from. And in just a minute, we're going to go ahead and kind of dive into that in a little bit more detail, have some back and forth. But before that, I want to take this time real quick to give a quick shout out to Lending Source Financial. Lending Source Financial is the company that made this podcast possible. They put up the money for the camera, the lights, all of the microphone equipment, everything so far of how this podcast is operated has been thanks to Lending Source Financial. They're a lending company that helps small business owners, medium-sized business owners acquire the funds that they need for the different projects that they want to tackle, whether it's employment hiring, whether it's buying equipment, you name it. Lending Source Financial handles it. They work with you personally, acting as a personal liaison, so that way you can get the budget or the exact finances that you need for your situation. So shout out to Julius Colonel, my uncle on that. And that's another thing about them too, is that they are a faith-based, Christian-led lending company. So they're going to work with you personally to make sure that you are taken care of, you understand all the terms, and that you can qualify for things that you otherwise might not qualify for. So hit up Lending Source Financial. Link to them will be in the description, so you can contact them if you need them. All right.
Man, I wish I would have known that before. I wouldn't have even came on this podcast. I would have just gone to Lending Source Financial.
Well, now you can, right after. Yeah. So let's go ahead and hop back into this, man. So you mentioned a lot of great points in there that I think that there's so much to dive into, but just some of the earlier notes that I had, and I wish I started taking it earlier because you had brought up some things, but you had mentioned that it requires a change of your heart.
Yes.
To have the right answers. So, and let's talk about like that heart part real quick as it existed before the change.
Of course.
Because I think that's a part that's super relatable for like 95% of non-Christians, is that like, okay, I think I'm a good person and I want to be a good person. And if there was something that was good out there, it wouldn't let me suffer. So there can't be something good. So screw all those people that say that there is a God. There's no way it can be real. What do you think as a person that was there and that was your state? Like, what do you think do you think that situation was something that maybe based off the circumstances and the era that you were from, because you're how old again?
I'm 35.
35. So when you were experiencing those things, how long ago was that in your life? That kind of doubt and that like...
I mean, so for me, it was 2018.
Okay. So about 5-ish years ago. You're about 30 at the time.
Yeah, when I started changing, when the transformation started happening for me. And so for the years prior, it was always, what can I gain from this circumstance and this situation to benefit my life? Mm-hmm. If there was no benefit, if there was no advantage for me, I had no need to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that played a big part in my life, in rejecting God for as long as I did. Because when you go based off of faith, you don't ask that question, how does it benefit me?
Right.
You don't ask that question, what advantage do I gain from this? Because I have to remind myself of this all the time. It's not about me anymore. Not that it ever was, but in my mind, it was always about me.
Well, that's like, isn't that the thing of like the way that most of us are like when it's not about God? It's so much like, and I don't think it's any person's individual faults. I think that that's the way that we are grown up to think about it from the time of children. I believe you're right. So in that, like, when we grow up in these four walls. Mm-hmm. And there used to be a time where you went outside of the four walls all the time and you communicated with people on a very regular basis, and people relied on each other in community. Right. So much to the point where, like, if one kid in the community acted up, all of the other parents had the right to correct that child.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a communal fashion.
I mean, that's where the saying came from. It takes a village.
Exactly.
You know, because it did take a village. I think the culture nowadays, instead of being about the village, about the community, and about not just protecting your brother and your neighbor, you know, that's what it used to be about. And I believe now it's distrust your brother, distrust your neighbor, watch for self.
Yes.
Because nobody else is going to have your back.
Yep.
And that's something that 2020 did prove to me, is that these people had my back when I had nothing to offer them. How could I be mistrusting of that? You know, and again, it came down to that point of they had God show them, you know, because what is Jesus? You know, a lot of that's what it broke down to for me. What is Jesus? What is this being that is so above everybody else? But I don't think Jesus is above everybody else. I think Jesus is kindness, loving, understanding, and above all, forgiving. So if I want to be like Jesus, why not just do those four simple things?
Right. 100%. No, yeah, I agree so much, right? Like, and it's 100% the case that, like, right now I think people have the spirit of wanting to in some way do that, but they want to do it by the standard that they understand it to.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the trick of that, as you've alluded to, as you've stated, is that based off of where we're at in life, how we're feeling, like the way that people treat us will determine what our metric for kindness and love and patience is. And like, there is an objective truth of what kindness is. And that's laid out for us in black and white text across several different translations. As contentious as they may be, it's consistent in how we display that kindness.
Absolutely.
And there are consistencies about several things that people without Jesus strive for, but find themselves lacking in that they're trying to do it based off of the way that they grew up, based off their own moral ethics, based off of their friend group, based off their environment.
Right.
And at a certain point, we have to figure out where we can go to for an objective understanding of it, where we don't have the ability to shift the goalpost.
Right.
And I think that's what you decided to do. In wisdom, you said, you know what, I have played God my whole life. Yeah. And a lot of people don't realize that that's what they're trying to do, is they're trying to play God. Yeah. Some people even acknowledge God and his presence and these things, but they don't acknowledge the fact that they are putting themselves before God and his example.
So, I mean, so there's a lot of ways that we play God. So one of them is that I've realized is when we are unforgiving of ourselves or other people. And the reason why is because, well, if Jesus died on the cross for me and my sins, but in my head I am bashing myself repeatedly, saying, I'm not worthy, mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. Like I'm saying I'm so bad. That means I'm putting my opinion here while Jesus is here. Because he said, your debt has been paid. But I'm saying, but I don't think it has. So who am I to say that it hasn't been paid? Why is my opinion of my transgressions or somebody else's transgressions greater than Jesus's? You know, that's one of the ways we play God. That's one of the ways I played God, for sure. And the other way that we play God is, we allow God to have the pen in his hand, but we want to write the story. So,
oh man, it's so true. Like,
hey, I'm gonna let you have the pen, but every now and then I'm just gonna direct you on what needs to be put down on paper. And at that point, it's like, well, then why don't you just have the pen in your hand instead of giving it to God?
Yeah, because
we want to look like we're giving it to God, but we're not, because we still want control of the situation, the outcome, everything else.
And you used the word that is, I think it's been the word that a lot of people have, typically it means it's a sign of weakness. Typically it's a sign of giving up, but the word is surrender.
Yeah.
And that word has so much power and so much nuance in a way that even me, like a year ago, I didn't quite know how to phrase it. I used to describe the sense of it as, I tried everything my way and everything failed. And so now I just decided to give up on life. I decided to give up on trying this, give up on trying that. And I'm just like, okay, what's God want me to do? I'm going to go and do that.
So I think there's a difference between giving up and surrender.
And there is, yes.
There's a very big difference. Giving up means I quit. To me, giving up is failure. Surrender, not so much. Surrender is an act where you are acknowledging that you cannot do it alone. So to me, that concept is very different.
Yes.
So if I'm running a business, let's say, right? And I realize that the money isn't adding up. If I just said, you know what, I'm going to close this down, this doesn't work, that's me giving up. Now, if I hire a financial consultant to look over the books, to figure out where the money is being mishandled and how we can fix the problem, that's surrendering.
Right, that's surrendering that aspect of, I don't know what I'm doing with this piece of business. I'm surrendering control of this to that person and trusting that person with it.
Who's a better manager.
And see, exactly, that's,
you gotta surrender to win.
Exactly. When I was young in my infancy of understanding scripture and the way that this, when I was first in need of Jesus in like a life-altering way, that feeling I only knew as giving up. And I think that in the place where you do give up and you don't give it to someone, if you give up without God, then it's just giving up. But when you admit that you can't do something, with and you don't have God there, it is just giving up. When you admit that you can't do something but God is there, and you give that piece to God, that is the surrender aspect. And that is the part that is so much of the key factor, as you've kind of illustrated here, is that you can pull someone who is of greater stature, of greater magnitude, more well-versed of that thing into the fold and give them that thing. And the key to that, of course, is that this has to be someone that is willing. Because I think a lot of people can hear this conversation and think, oh, I need to surrender this thing of my life to like my pastor, for example, or to my friends. And our friends are going to do their best always to help us, to comfort us and all that. But it's not their job to take our fight and our struggle away. They are there to give us reinforcement, but they are not the people we surrender to. It's just like it's God's job to give us that feeling of wholeness. And that's what he promises us that he will do.
Absolutely.
And then our friends show up as the workers of that employer.
So the way I look at it is, and I'm stealing from Journey.
Right.
One of, I can't remember which pastor it was right now. I want to say it was John. But he was talking about the cross. Maybe it could have been Dustin too, because by this point they were kind of transitioning. But either way, it was either John or Dustin. But they were talking about the cross. Your up and down is your relationship to God.
Right.
Your side to side is your relationship to your neighbor. The cross doesn't work without one of them.
Yep.
Then it's just a stick.
Yeah, in either direction.
It's just a line. It's just a line, either vertical or horizontal. Mm-hmm. You know, if you're cutting out God, but you're relying solely on your friends or your community, then you're just in a horizontal line. Mm-hmm. And the thing with that is you can never move up.
Yeah.
And the other aspect is if it's just you and God, I mean, the Bible says it itself, no man is an island. Mm-hmm. You have to be in community.
Yeah.
So if it's just me and God, then I've cut the community out. Mm-hmm. And if I've cut the community out, then I've cut out an aspect of God. Yeah. Where he would speak to me through other people.
Exactly.
Because these other people may have wisdom that I can't just get from reading the Bible. Maybe they have a different way of looking at it that I never looked at before.
Absolutely,
like,
yeah.
Hey, do you ever think that maybe this was what the, you know? And I'm like, oh man. You know, there have been several times like that where, because my mind is focused on one thing, I can't look at the bigger picture.
Yep.
We're going to get to that. See that segue?
Yeah, I love it, man. Oh, what? So, you got to write these things.
So you look at you're so fine point on that small picture, that small little dot in the picture. Sometimes you need somebody to come around and say, hey, you want to zoom out a little bit because you're missing the bigger one.
Right. There's the greater one. Let me direct you. You know, you're stuck over here in this specific book of the Bible. Check over here, though. Here's got something good to say.
Exactly.
And that's exactly where the community aspect comes in, is that they can be more eyes and ears on the ground when you are so stuck with your head up a watermelon that you can't look around and see the seeds.
Yep, absolutely.
So in that idea of like being hyper zoomed in on a subject, I think that is something that, in an attempt to evangelize, a lot of people can run into all kinds of barriers or
of course
borders or just people, and when these things come up, they don't know how to navigate that necessarily.
Correct. So one of the things is the way I used my arguments when I was younger against Christians, against any religion, really was I broke it down into really, really fine points. And I'd make you go punch for punch instead of looking at the whole. You know, if I take any Bible verse, I can take it out of context and make it say what I want it to say. Now you have to argue on that point, and if you're trying to win on that level, you're never going to win.
Yep.
And I think that's the mistake I see a lot of people make, is that, you know, and maybe it's because I have the experience of being on the other side and knowing how that argument plays out. That for me, it was easy to pick up on. But when you stoop to somebody's level on that point, I mean, like we were saying before, I could make Hitler a good guy if I zoom in enough, and I could show you how he brought Germany out of bankruptcy, how every person had a Volkswagen, which, by the way, Volkswagen was owned by the Nazi Party. That's how they were founded.
Oh, snap, really?
Yeah, they were founded by the Nazi Labor Party.
Oh, snap.
Yeah. Most people don't know history. But every German citizen had a house. Every German citizen had a job. I mean, if you look at the finer points, for his people, he did a lot of good. That doesn't make him a good person. Because if I just focus on that finer point, you're going to look at it, you can't argue those finer points, and you can't say, well, no, he didn't do that, because yes, he did. But what you want me to look at is the big picture where, yeah, he did good for this small itty-bitty group here, but look at everybody else that suffered around him. You know, so it's not just going down to that level of trying to play that game of, well, I'm going to win this argument with this one verse. No, you're not going to do that, because that person that you're arguing against more than likely has just as well studied the Bible. They've studied it in a different way. They've studied it to prove their points.
Yeah.
It's not real.
And it's like, even if you're going to win on that one particular thing, it's like, okay, well, here's my laundry list of like 45 other verses that you have to clear before I'm willing to like listen to you still. And then in that time, I found out more things, and it's a never-ending battle.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why, okay, so this was an argument that was had at work between two coworkers. Well, not really an argument, but a discussion. One of them, he's a non-believer, and the other one is a believer. And I noticed that, you know, the non-believer was pointing out contradictions or flaws in certain aspects.
Right.
And he was trying to argue, and the believer was trying to argue that point for point. And I overheard it, and I had to come, and I was like, you're looking at it in small terms. Look at the big picture. Don't argue point for point. You'll lose. Win the overall battle. You're not looking to win the round. You're looking to win the fight. You know, if
this is what you told to the believer?
Or no.
Said to them as a group?
I didn't say that. That was my thought process.
Okay.
So what I had said to them, to the non-believer, was, you know, you can break apart anything you want, but at the end of the day, it's a leap of faith. You know, you don't have knowledge. Nobody has knowledge. No. But what we have is faith. Faith is what determines how we respond to the situation. You know, because I have faith that certain things are going to work out. And if I step out of the way, they tend to work out because I'm not controlling the narrative. I'm not controlling the story. I'm stepping out of the way and letting God do what God does best.
Yep.
The problem that a lot of non-believers have and a lot of believers have is when we start trying to control the narrative and the story, that's when we're not having faith anymore.
Yeah.
We're trying to control the faith.
Yeah.
You can't control faith. It's a leap.
I was having a discussion yesterday with somebody that I met, a very interesting person. I'll probably have him on the podcast, but we were talking about how the things that you believe in only have that power if you allow it to have that much power. In that, if you believe, you know, there are some things physiologically, obviously, we're not going to sit here and change around our physical condition. There's mind-body connection stuff that is suggested to a certain extent. But just as far as if you are a person that wants to, let's say, kick an addiction, for example, if you believe constantly that you are an addict and you can't beat it and that this pulse just overtakes you and you can never control it, every time the impulse comes up, you're going to kind of give yourself that out of, I can't help it, this is just my body. But if you're a person that's an addict who believes, I'm a child of God and God does not want me like this and he will give me the power to overcome, and you give that power to your belief in God, that belief is going to be what allows you to busy yourself with something else or to say no or to call whoever it needs to be called.
I mean, Henry Ford said it. He said, whether you believe that you can or you can't, either way, you're right.
Yes, absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
So, you know, it breaks down into that. Like, you know, whether you believe you can or you cannot, you're right. You know, because so my grandma, God rest her soul, she was diagnosed with leukemia when I was born, I think. Actually, 2 years before I was born. And they gave her 3 years to live. They told her, you're not going to make it past 3 years. She made it 7 years.
Wow.
And I think a big part of the reason why she made it 7 years was because she believed that with God on her side that she was going to continue to fight. You know, and that's the thing. Like, you know, something I've noticed is that mindset. like my mom said in 2020, the light has gone out from your eyes. And at that point, my health was starting to decline. But the minute I prayed with Nick and I cried and I gave it up to God, my health started getting better. Because I hadn't given up. I mean, I had given up, and that's why the light was gone from my eyes. But the moment that God came back down,
when you switched from giving up to surrendering,
that was the switch, and that's when my health was like, I'll never say my health will ever be back at 100. It won't. I mean, if I take the physical tests to determine your physical age rather than your literal age, I'm pretty sure I'm like 109. but
a man is a walking pile of dust.
Pretty much. Yo, you should hear my knees when I squat down. Crack, snap, crackle, and pop. They're Rice Krispie treats. I swear to God. But that's the thing, like, I have arthritis. I know I do. I have 40% of a pancreas. I have a second belly button. I have autoimmune diseases. I have diabetes. I'm part of a pancreatitis group on Facebook, and one of the questions that gets asked the most is always, well, I go down these rabbit holes of people with pancreatitis and they don't live long. Well, yeah. But is that going to stop you from delivering your purpose? If you're looking at a time frame, then you're looking at the quantity, not the quality.
Yeah. That's a great point. If you're looking at a time frame, you're looking at the quantity, not the quality.
Yep, absolutely.
I love that.
So when you're at that point when you're just like, oh, I only have 10 years. Well, who's to say that? The doctors gave my grandma 3. She made 7.
Yep.
They told me I wasn't supposed to wake up. I woke up. 13% oxygen. You can ask your lovely wife. Is very low. It's very bad to have 13% oxygen. 0 out of 10 recommendation. It is not somewhere you want to be. My mom told me that when she saw me at that point, it reminded her of my grandma dying in her last days, because she was literally breathing like a fish out of water. They're like, you're trying to grasp in air and you can't. And that's exactly what she said I was breathing like. They had put the masks on me, everything, and nothing was lifting my oxygen levels. So they had to induce me and put me on life support. And that's okay. And a lot of people saw me naked. That is not okay.
Why would y'all do that to me?
I was so vulnerable. They obviously my friends had to help, because I couldn't do it alone, and that, again, they had nothing to gain from that, and it wasn't just me that they took care of. That group that I talked about from Kaz and Caleb's,
right?
They not only came to visit me as a group, which brought me to tears, because I was like, I've been trying to push you guys away since I met you, and you guys are coming to me in my most vulnerable state and saying, we love you, we're here, even though you tried to push us away. And I'm like, I don't like this feeling. Gets me all warm and fuzzy inside, and I don't like it. It's quelling the anger. Because that, I think Martin Luther King said it best. You don't fight hate with hate. You fight hate with love. That's how you overcome hate. You don't fight it on the basis of, oh, well, I'm going to beat you down on this level. No. You fight them with love. You fight them by showing them kindness, by showing them forgiveness, understanding, respect, patience, tolerance, And That's one of the things that Jesus said on Sermon on the Mount. That to love your neighbor as you love yourself. It doesn't say love them if. It just says to love them. It doesn't say only those that agree with you, only those that share your point of view. Just love them. So at what point do we look at somebody else and we say, well, they don't look like me, they don't believe like me, they don't do the same actions I do, so I don't love you. I'll tolerate you, but I won't love you. That's not what he said. Mm-hmm. He said, love them. And to me, you have to show them kindness to show them love. I'm not saying that you say, hey, I know that, you like doing drugs, so I bought you this bag of drugs to show you kindness. No. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that you love them enough to say, Jesus came to confront. He came to challenge systems. He didn't come to condemn. When you condemn, there's no what's the word? It starts with an R. Not rehabilitation, but
reconciliation.
Yes, reconciliation, and the other R word.
Regeneration.
No. When you turn towards God.
Repentance.
Repentance.
Yes.
Thank you. So there's no reconciliation. There's no repentance when you condemn somebody, because you cannot.
That's a good point, yeah.
But when you are able to challenge and when you are able to...
that's a good point.
To confront systems.
When you condemn someone, you shut the door for repentance on them.
Yep, which means there's no reconciliation, there's no growth, there's nothing. You
That's
slam
such a
them
great
down.
way to say that.
But when you are able to forgive, when you are able to love, people can transform. They can repent on their own, and they can reconcile on their own, with the help of God, of course. But if you condemn, you're shutting that door. And that's where a lot of people get their mix-up, is because I think, especially in this day and age, we have a habit of condemning people who don't agree with us.
Yeah.
And it's become socially acceptable to condemn those that aren't like us.
It's a whole culture to it now.
Is.
It's a whole cancel culture, or just...
And so you're condemning somebody. You're not letting them be who they want to be. And you know what I found? I found that when you don't allow somebody to be who they want to be, they will fight you tooth and nail to be who they want to be anyway.
And real quick, I said something about cancel culture, but typically when people think of cancel culture, they think of it from a look at these liberals trying to cancel culture, this conservative speaker. But also, there's certainly, on the conservative side, people that go crazy to the wall.
Look at what the conservatives did to Target and Anheuser-Busch.
Yeah.
They completely canceled them, so much that they had to pull Pride stuff from the shelves to appease people.
Yeah.
And so, it works both ways, whether you're conservative or whether you're liberal. I don't think that has anything to do with it. I think what it comes down to is this person doesn't share what my point of view is, and so I don't want to hear their opinion.
Yeah.
Which, when you do that, you're shutting the door for any type of meaningful change. Because at that point, you're not looking for middle ground. You're looking to win.
Yeah.
And I would rather lose the argument and gain the person. T.D. Jakes and Stephen Furtick talk about this all the time. I would rather lose the argument and gain the person than lose the person and win the argument.
100%.
Because if I gain the person, through example, not through pushing, not through my words, but through my actions, they will see a different side.
And I think that's kind of the hard part that people struggle with, right? They want to have this verbal brawl and this mental battle.
Well, again, it comes down to that instant gratification culture. You know, I want to win today. Yeah. I want to win now.
Yeah, I want to hear you concede on your point and accept Jesus right now.
Instead of playing the long game. You know, a boxer doesn't, you know, what good does it do to win the first round and then lose the next 11?
Yeah.
Right? It is 12 in boxing?
I believe so. I believe it's 12,
used to UFC.
and then
I'm used to MMA,
there's points in there too.
Yeah,
you know,
so, I mean, if I'm only winning the first round, but I lose the next 11, did I win the fight? No, I lost the fight by a lot.
Yeah,
by a lot.
And that's part of like what frustrates me with like the culture of the way that you know, speaking specifically towards like Christian media, that irritates me is you see these things like Daily Wire, Fox, and a bunch of other, you know, your Matt Walsh's, things like that. Yeah. And the big thing is like, ooh, I'm gonna dunk on these liberals. I'm gonna own them. I'm gonna show them why their logic is flawed. Right. And it's like, okay, great. You're doggone singing the song to the choir, and you're not doing anything. You're bolstering your side, and you're doing nothing to actually further the purpose of what you say you're trying to further.
So, for me, that comes down to I don't know if you've ever listened to Jordan Peterson.
Yes.
One of his finer points that I've listened to is how to argue with people. So a lot of people take that side, how Matt Walsh and people like that try to argue, which is you use the straw man argument. You break down their argument so it looks so fallible that you could just push it over. Jordan Peterson said, if you really want to win somebody over, if you really want to show that you love somebody, you don't do that. You don't use the straw man argument. You bolster their argument. So not only do you bolster their argument, but you explain it in your words back to them before you ever respond. So you are clear and concise on what you are arguing. And because that lets the other person know you're actually listening. Yeah. You're not just trying to win an argument, you're listening. And when you listen, you learn. You know? So if you're just using the straw man argument, you're not listening. You just want to win. Yeah. And so a lot of people will get into that verbal brawl because of that. Yeah. But if you're bolstering their argument, if you're like, well, this is what you meant to say, correct? And you have to get the acknowledgement from the other person that how you phrased it is what their intended argument is. And then you work on that. You don't work on killing to making it a caricature so that you can push it over. You work on making it as strong as possible so that both of you are learning and listening.
And that approach is good because it is so much more engaging. It's you absolutely. Saying, hey, is this good? This is right.
And
do I understand
trust.
you?
You build rapport, you know, and with trust and rapport, you open the lines for communication.
Absolutely.
And then when you do that, now I can show you through my actions what I'm about. Yeah. Not through my words, because there's a lot of people that use empty words.
100%.
But are not about it, you know? I mean, and it's not just relegated to the church, but I mean, you look at rappers, they talk about this life, but 9 times out of 10, they don't live that life. They just know it sells. Yeah. 100%. And what happens?
Especially now. Yeah. Back in the 80s, 70s-ish, they were way more about it. Now, though, it's just a lyric in a song, Yeah.
So, I mean, at what point do we look at it and are we like, well, you know, you're just empty talk? It's a breath of hot air.
Yeah, and that's the part that, like, that's why I find guys, we typically have a tougher time when it comes to things like whether it's getting that first instance of a person wanting to like join us, maybe like let's say at church, or wanting to do a Bible study or something, we struggle with that more because we come at it from that pure logical side, like, okay, let me handle every little piece, versus I find that I know so many people who get invited to church and then have their world shifted, but the base of that was the start of a woman inviting them. And it's just because like when that person is going because a woman invited them, there's not this thing of, okay, I need to make sense of this. It's like, why is she so happy?
Right.
You know, and they just allow their joy to exude from them, and their jubilance and their fire for it.
And that was the thing that I was talking about earlier, that joy versus happiness. You know, happiness comes in small doses. It's a cookie. It's a piece of fudge for me because I'm a diabetic and I can't have it all the time. So when I get it, it's like, oh, yay. So, you know, little things will make you happy. And like I said earlier, joy is something, it's a state that cannot be shaken. It's a state that doesn't depend on the circumstances of my outside world to give to me.
Right.
You know, happiness depends on the outside world. It depends on my circumstances, my situation.
Yep.
You know, that's what leads me to happiness. But if I have joy in my heart because I have God, because I have Jesus, then it doesn't matter what my circumstances are. It doesn't matter what my situation is, because I still have Jesus.
Yeah.
I still have God. He is still there. He is still prevalent. And that cannot be shaken.
Yeah.
You know? Sorry, my eye is itching right here.
Yeah, no, I think it's a symptom of these lights, because, you know, that's the thing too. Like sometimes I get very like, as we sit here and talk because of that. Yeah. It's so, not you, don't worry.
I'm like, oh man, my eye is really itchy. But no, that joy comes from, and it took me a long time to figure that out too, was that joy came from surrender. Because when I'm not in control, I can relax.
Yeah. I love that. I think, so I wasn't planning on going into this type of topic, but I think that just opens the door so much. Like when we look at a relationship, like let's say God's most sanctified relationship, a marriage. Right? There's certain elements in a relationship that we love on both sides, not just the woman's side, but on the man's side too, that when we get to surrender these things, that is the part that we feel the most confident in. Like on the woman's side, it may be, okay, I know that my husband is going to be my emotional rock, my spiritual leader, my physical protector, you know, all these things right here. And so these are aspects where if I'm feeling weak, I can fold into my husband's strength and know that he will bolster me up, encourage me, exhort me, or just listen, or just be with me. That's something that a woman can surrender onto the Lord, and then through the Lord's servant, her husband. Right. And there is a confidence and there is a joy in that. And on the husband's side, we can surrender this thing of how am I looking for happiness? How am I finding peace? A lot of times, guys, we just want to find a place where we can go somewhere and it can just be quiet, where the chaos of everything that we have to do can relax and we can just sit and be with someone joyous.
So when I was younger, I always used to say, I want a woman to be my peace. Not knowing what that really meant. Right. And meanwhile, I was bringing chaos into their life. So how can she be my peace if the chaos is me?
That's a great piece of insight.
You know, it's difficult for a woman to be my peace if I'm bringing her chaos.
Yes.
But that's the thing. So, you know,
that's where the part of the surrender comes in, right?
I think you hit on a very important thing too, though, is I think that when you're really bringing peace into a relationship,
right, you
don't have to ask for the other person to bring you peace. You know that they're going to bring you peace. You don't have to ask for it anymore. You know, you don't sit down with your wife and you don't ask her, hey, babe, can you be my peace today? You don't have to do that because you know that that's what she's going to bring to the table. Just like she doesn't have to say, hey, babe, I need you to be my emotional rock today. No, because she knows that she can rely on you for that. That's the thing. So when you're asking these things, are you asking them because that's what you want, or are you asking them because you don't know how to find them? And if you don't know how to find them, then the better question isn't, can you be my peace? It's, how do I bring peace out of this relationship?
There's layers to that, because I feel like I agree like 85%, but then 15% may disagree. And in that, here's
that's
where
what open discussion is about.
Absolutely. So here we go, right? So in that thought of like, I think it is true. We can't ask someone to be our peace. That is completely ridiculous of anybody. The only person that can be our peace is God.
Absolutely.
And in order for us to be able to understand peace from a person, we have to have an understanding of what peace is and looks like from the Lord's perspective.
Absolutely.
Because when we then assume someone to play some part of peace, we have to say, okay, well, am I facilitating a space where that person can be peaceful, or am I facilitating a battleground?
Right.
And sometimes if we're going to facilitate a battleground, of course we can't expect for that person to be able to bring us. And sometimes facilitating a battleground isn't just making sure that person is doing like on top of the mountain. Sometimes that's just understanding a person's needs. Right. So like as men, do we understand where our wives are feeling maybe neglected somewhere or unloved or uncared for?
Oh, I hate you right now. No, I just had this discussion with my girlfriend on the ride home. She told me, because she told me, I'm going to be real honest. She told me, she said, I need more quality time with you. I need you to meet my needs on the spending time. She said, I feel like we only spend a couple hours before we go to bed together. And other than that, there's no time.
Yeah.
You know, so the fact that you brought that up to me, I was like, oh, I don't like you, because it reinforces that of, you know, what she was saying, where she's asking me about her emotional needs, you know, whether, you know, in her case, it was me spending more time with her. And I'm like, okay. So I want to justify my behaviors on why I can't spend time with her. Yeah. But, you know, my sponsor always told me, he said, you never justify a good behavior, do you? It's only the incorrect behaviors that you justify. I'm like, So I justify why I can't spend time, because I know what I'm doing is I'm making an excuse to why I can't meet her need. Yeah. So how fair is it of me to ask her to meet my needs when she's telling me flat out, hey, I need time with you? And I'm like, well, I can't because of X, Y, Z. Right. So I'm justifying a bad behavior because it's acceptable for me, but not for her, right?
Now, see, man, there's so many layers, right? Because, so there's that, and then there's like, because I think my fear when I hear people hearing this conversation, then they get, okay, so my girlfriend says that she needs to spend like 5 hours a day with me, and if I don't give her 5 hours a day, I'm a bad boyfriend, or I'll be a bad husband.
See, so it comes back to that quality over quantity argument. Yeah. So if I spend 5 hours with you, but that 5 hours I'm strictly on my phone, I never look at you, I never talk to you, did you really just gain 5 hours with me? Exactly. But if I'm taking you out on, let's say, like a 1 or 2 hour date, where we're not going to the movies, because that's the point. The point of a movie is now I'm zoned out, I'm not talking to you, I'm not getting to know you. Yep. I have to be intentional in always dating my significant other. That is it. If I'm spending 2 hours, would I rather spend it in a movie where it's dark and I can't see you and I'm not talking to you? Or would I rather spend it at a park making a picnic, and talking to you, looking you in the eye, having that contact,
right? Checking on her spiritual health, checking on how her heart is, like what are the things that she wants to do to be joyous.
So if you want 5 hours, but I'm only on the phone, or we're just watching movies and TV but not talking,
yep,
are we really spending time? Whereas if, let's say, I'm only spending a half hour with you, but that half hour is us cooking in the kitchen, laughing, joking together. What means more? What's more quality time? Because it's in the word quality time, not quantity time.
Yeah.
It's not saying I need 80 hours with you. This isn't a job.
Yeah.
It's I need the best of you.
The mic on him, boy.
When she hears this, she's gonna be very upset at me. She's like, you jerk! You knew
I'm
the whole
holding you
time.
to that. You knew what it was. You just played stupid.
So yeah, I'm gonna catch some flack, but it's alright. It's alright because you know what? Looking at it through this lens today. You know, because yesterday I wanted to justify. You know, it was 2 a.m. on a drive back from Macon. I wanted to justify my behaviors. Today, sitting with you, I'm able to look at it and be like, oh, no. I was very wrong. And so now, the question isn't why I was wrong. Like I told you, that's not a spiritual question. Nobody cares about why. What and how? How do I fix this with her? How do I go about spending quality time with her? What is it that she needs to see the love in me for her?
Yeah. That's my man. I'm glad that, you've been able to kind of...
Revelations.
Yeah, I love that. I was talking with somebody the other day, and he said that he realized something... and so it's always good to know that, the guests are gaining something from this. I'm glad to know about that.
Maybe it's not me helping others. Maybe it's just, this conversation helping me.
And, this is, honey, do you mind if I share some of our recent struggles?
Depends on the struggle.
Huh? You trust me? Okay. Well... So recently, I've had my wife and I, as we've moved in together and kind of combined bills and things like that, there's been a lot in the way of just these costs kind of going up.
Right.
She's used to living with one person. I'm used to a certain amount of income, but I've been doing the podcast. It's not generating revenue, financial strains.
Right.
There's a light at the end of the tunnel very soon around the corner, but we got to make it work. And so as a result, I've been picking up a lot of Uber and things like that.
Right.
And what this has meant is, literally the other day I had like a 15-hour work day. And yesterday it was donating plasma and then going to see somebody that was unwell and then immediately jumping into Uber. But more so the issue being that the state of all this work that I've been doing has left me dead tired, dead just unsociable, to say the least.
Been there.
And of course, it's the wife that feels the brunt of that.
Yeah.
There's, a desire for affection, to be able to talk in a way that is loving and feels like it's some amount of quality time. And this isn't something that was like a couple weeks ago. This is something like a couple hours ago. And so,
like me.
Yeah, two peas in a pod here. Man, it's a good thing this episode comes out in a month, right? Oh man, maybe I'll have to front row it. But it's, as I'm sitting here, and I was doing something similar where because our instinct is so much well, you don't understand. This is where I'm at, and I'm trying to do this.
I have to provide. I have to bring something to the table.
And it took sitting there and just being like, okay, Devontae, you have these thoughts and feelings, but is that bringing her comfort? Is that the thing that's bringing her comfort though? What does she want? Does she want you to sit here and make all this money? At a certain point, sure, but not at the cost of this. And you have to recognize that, and you have to address that. And so I had to say, okay, look, I know that, you know, here's what I'm gonna try to do. I'm gonna try and work these things, and I'm gonna take this time right here, and you know, how would you like that? Do you want me to go and not do these certain times? Do you want me to, instead of working 15 hours, to work like maybe 12 hours, 10 hours, or, you know, if I'm gonna go out, instead of going out for 5 nights a week in order to get the high times, do you want, like, and then she said, yeah, I would like it if you went out maybe every other night, and then once I fall asleep, then you can go out. And so there's that, you know, we have to create that space where we don't put them in shutdown mode, but we put them in, okay, let's figure out what you think is a solution and how well can I make that work, and I'll do my best to make that work. There may be some give and take that has to play in here, but we'll get closer to the solution than we are now. And I think for a lot of guys, we can just get to a place where we're just like, I'm trying to do the job, the mission, like, come on now, get on board. And that's the easy way to go, right? People say all the time that women are more emotional, and in a lot of cases, this is true. We are emotional as men in a different way, in that we allow our emotions to be justified through the cause of the mission, and we sacrifice whatever it takes to make the mission happen.
You said a key word there, justified. What did I just say about justification? You don't justify the good. You only justify the incorrect actions.
Here's another thing about justification, right? Anytime that we as people justify something, that means that we're explaining away something bad. There's only one way that justifying anything is happening, and that's when God justifies us.
Exactly. See, ding, ding. But that's the point, though. I mean, you know. So we're supposed to be leaders, but not everybody gets led the same way. You know, that's something that I've also realized. You know, there are certain people that you have to kind of be more forceful with and kind of like push a little more. And
this is going into a space where I feel like in church world, we don't like to talk about. So sure. I love us going here. Let's go.
So there are some people that you need to push and prod a little more, like, hey, you know, kind of got to get moving. And there are other people where if you take that approach with them, they're going to fight you back and be like, no, because they don't want to be pushed and poked into doing something. What they want is they want you to grab their hand and say, we're going to do this together. And so I
love that switch around.
Yeah,
I love that, man.
You have to know who you're talking to, whether it's relationships as far as, you know, a romantic relationship, husband and wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, what have you, or whether it's friendship relationships, or even business relationships. You have to know your audience. You have to know who you're talking to. You know, and that comes with time, obviously, of getting to know the person. Like, take me and my girlfriend, for example. I know that if I push her into doing something, I'm going to have a bad time. It is not going to be a fun experience. Not because she doesn't want to, but because I'm pushing, I'm nudging, rather than saying, hey, let's do this together. Be my partner in this.